million doses have been promised for South Africa as per the deal. However, South Africa has recently come up with a statement that the new variant is not vaccinated, or people having the new variant would not be protected by the vaccination given by AstraZeneca. Now, this has led to a question, and nearly 1 million doses have been returned back to Serum Institute back in Pune, and the 5 lakh which were on the way are still on hold. So that is another important update. If we talk about budget, this time's budget we have already covered a separate lecture, but the center has estimated that 2021-22 we have witnessed a decline of nearly 7.7% in terms of GDP. There has been increase in the fiscal stimulus, the effective fiscal stimulus by 5%. The share of agriculture is really important. It constitutes to 20% of the GDP for the first time in last 17 years. That means agriculture was one of the only sectors that showed a positive growth rate of 3.4% at the constant prices during the post-pandemic period. And once we are having the agricultural protest, this proportion probably could change. So protecting agriculture is indeed one of the essential sectors for Indian economy, where nearly more than 50% of the population is dependent on agriculture. Also, if we talk about schemes, there have been numerous schemes that have come up for agriculture. This talks about crop insurance, the various irrigation techniques, talking about farmer producer organizations, fisheries, rural bankings, the FPOs that are there, the PM Kisan Yojana. But we have seen that the funds that should flow into the schemes are not up to the mark. Also, as per the Ujjwala scheme, providing the LPG cylinders to the rural household was one of the efforts, but it had been extended to only 10 million beneficiaries. However, the targets were much higher. So there have been gaps that have been seen. Now, this is an image of a satellite imagery that has shown a major crack in A68A, which is one of the icebergs in Antarctica. It had split in 2017 into a smaller slab, which is A68G. Now, this is a smaller slab, and since the large icebergs are breaking down, they are giving in more surface area for evaporation, leading to future kind of more scenarios where the climate change could further worsen and the heating effect could further worsen the breaking of the icebergs in long run. Similarly, we have seen some of the developments in terms of the mineral amendment rules 2021. As per the mineral amendment rules, the facility for early availability of minerals in the market would be made, and this would be on a 50% rebate basis that would be there. The union government has also established one of the first what we could say a wetland conservation center at Chennai in Tamil Nadu. So another major development that is there. In terms of midday meals, worldwide, nearly 39 billion of people, or I would say of students, have missed their midday meals. So it's a huge number. 39 billion students worldwide have missed their midday meals scheme due to the 2020 pandemic and the lockdown across the world. Again, if we talk about the pollution analysis in major cities, Lahore, Delhi and Dhaka in Bangladesh are some of the towns that have reported worst level of pollutions. Again, one of the very interesting phenomena is about the concept of milliseconds. Now, if we talk about the Earth's spinning, to spin one rotation, it takes 24 hours, which converts to nearly 86,400 seconds. Now, what has happened was in July 2020, the shortest day ever was recorded where the rotation was less than 1.4 milliseconds. Now, even if there is a change by half a millisecond that is seen, there would be a distance that would be created of nearly 25 centimeters from the GPS satellite that would make the GPS satellites fail. So, so it's very, very important to maintain the right amount and the right proportion of the rotation. Now, what and who tracks the millisecond? So the millisecond has been tracked by International Earth Rotation and Reference System Services that is there. The idea here is there could be numerous reasons cited to it. It could be because of climate change, atmospheric change, sea loss, ice loss in the polar areas. Then it could be atmospheric pressure that could change, or the sea land shift that could take place, which could be responsible for the changes in the millisecond, and Earth is spinning a little faster than usual. But this would significantly affect the developments that have seen in terms of satellites, in terms of the space developments that we have seen. The next topic that we are coming to discuss is further interesting. It is the physics and chemistry of food. Now, we are talking about some of the interesting foods. For example, coriander. You can see it in chopped form as a decoration on most of the foods, but some people do not actually like this because it gives them a soapy flavor, and that is because of the aldehydes that are present in the coriander. However, if they are consumed in the processed form of chutneys, they are okay with it because there is a reaction to break down those aldehyde that takes place. Similarly, if you are consuming a lot of processed food, you should know that the salt that is there is not in the iodized form. The iodized form of salt actually leaves a metallic taste, and therefore any processed food that you are consuming would either have a pink salt or a black salt, which would lack what? Which would lack iodine. So there could be issues related to thyroid functioning. Then again, if you are preparing meat, soaking in salt syrup or salt water, we could say, is one of the common practices, and that is which causes the meat to get tender. Now, tenderization is different from marinating, because when you are marinating, it's just the flavor that is introduced. However, when you are tenderizing, it is preventing the loss of water from the muscles, and therefore it makes the meat much more soft. The next is wheat flour. Now, wheat flour that we consume from the chakkis basically is a flour that is damaged or has damaged proteins and starch. Now, what happens is, in the process of basically crushing it down, the protein and the starch are removed, and therefore this wheat is good for making chapatis because it would turn it soft, but not ideal for making or baking, we could say. Okay, then we have the traditional coarse grains that are there. For example, millets, jowar, bajra, barley. So those are the crops which are to be consumed in various ways. Now, traditionally, there are three ways of making the chapatis of the millet flour softer. One is to introduce hot water while you are doing it, and this would gelatinize the flour and make it relatively soft. The next is to add a pinch of xanthan gum into it, and this does not cause any change in the taste or any change in the color, but it would basically reduce the coarseness and the breaking of the chapatis. The next is introducing maida into it, but definitely it diminishes the properties and the taste as well, so it is not one of the preferred methods. The next important thing is baking soda. Baking soda actually acts as a catalyst. So if you are fond of chole or chickpeas, what happens is chickpeas are soaked in soda. Now when they are soaked in soda, that soda is actually absorbed with the seed coat or the pectin that is present, and it allows the water to enter in, making it soft. But soda is basic in nature and has a property to create flatulence, and therefore in order to curb that, we add tea bags to it, which make it acidic. So there is a acid base neutralization that occurs. Also, baking soda is added to potatoes to make it much more crispier and brown while you are preparing it. Similarly, baking soda is also added to egg to prepare omelets. The next is another interesting topic that has been there, and that is forest officers now have the permission to hold guns. Now there have been a huge controversy regarding this, which talks about militarization of conservation, where the officers have the right to conserve the forest land, but on the other hand they have been provided guns. Now when we talk about forest, there are two elements in the forest. One is the forest management, the other is the wildlife management. Now the forest management is management of the minor resources that are obtained, the minor produce that are obtained from the forest. But for wildlife, to curb the poaching of the wildlife, the Supreme Court has provided permission to keep the guns. To keep the guns with the forest officers. However, there have been lots and lots of debates and arguments that this would create a terror for the tribals, for the local people who are dwelling into the forest and consider forest as their native land. Again, already the bureaucrats, the people in administration, the police have enormous powers, and further giving them right to keep guns would be a kind of further imposition of more powers onto the forest or the tribal dwellers that are there. The next very interesting topic is around cotton subsidies. We compare two countries, United States versus India. Now, interesting fact is, in India we have nearly 9 million cotton farmers that are there, in contrast to only 8,000 cotton farmers which are in United States. However, the land holding, if we talk about the farmers in United States, it is 624 hectares in contrast to merely 1.2 hectares in India. Despite of all this, what happens is, India being a huge producer of cotton, the actual produce that comes out from India has a heavier cost or higher cost in comparison to the produce that is coming from United States. This is because of the subsidies that the government is providing in United States. This keeps the prices of the cotton from United States low into the international market, and this creates a tension for the countries which are huge producers of cotton, but because they do not have adequate subsidies, or the other nations have higher subsidies, they are at a verge where they are trying to create their existence into the international market. So what is important to understand is, US has nearly 35% exports, which are higher as compared to a country like India. Nearly 85% of the cotton from United States is exported. Now, what we need to understand is how it all started. So, US basically started giving subsidies as a part of Agricultural Adjustment Act, which was in 1933. And then it was a time when United States was recovering from Great Depression. The time it was recovering from Great Depression, government gave in subsidy in order to protect the prices of the cotton farmers. Later on, there were policies that brought about protection for market loans that was there, and cotton subsidies were further enhanced, but the pattern was highly skewed mainly towards the large farmers and corporations. So a huge amount of subsidy, nearly $40 billion of US subsidy went to the cotton industries, and this created the output at a relatively much lesser price as compared to India. Now if we talk about the subsidies that we have seen, there have been a massive difference that has been seen in terms of the price advantage that has been seen. United States, the cotton subsidy has led to a significant low rate and a decline from nearly 98 US cents per pound that has been seen to 48 US pounds, and further it was up, but it was not that up, it was around 75 US pounds US cents per pound that was seen, which was relatively much lower than the cost that was borne by India during that time. Not only just India, we also talk about the C4 nations. C4 nations are the 4 nations from Africa, which are Benin, then you have Burkina Faso, then we have Chad and Mali. Now these 4 are the major producers of cotton, and the dubbed cotton that is obtained, which is in the name of dubbed cotton 4 or C4 cotton, the demand for that has been substantially decreasing because of relatively higher price in comparison to the price being produced by the cotton farmers from United States, and therefore this has limited the scope of cotton in international market. Now there has been a huge demand and a huge pressure on WTO to bring in certain policies for the subsidy regulation worldwide. The next is one of the very unique laws that has come up in France. One of the tourists that went to France basically complained about a noise pollution problem, and the reason for that was the rooster used to crow every morning. So they filed a litigation in France in order to curb that law. However, on February 4th, the French government brought about a rule which says the law protecting the sensory heritage of the French countryside, and it says that it is one of the major integral parts of the ecology of the rural countryside areas of France, and therefore no action would be taken. Also, the ecosystem should be respected by all means. There is no provision of giving likes or dislikes about the existing countryside that is there. How much chaotic it could be, how much noisy it could be, but there can be no complaints that could be filed on this issue. Similarly, one of the urban areas of France, which is the region of Orléans, has seen numerous visitors visiting the seaside, and there have been huge gushes and sounds of seas that have been seen. So again, the same concept has come up, be it the countryside area or be it the urban area, that's the rural area or the urban area. The same law would apply for ecological restoration and preservation. Now, if a country like France can bring in certain rules and laws, why can't India bring in certain rules that we would be curbing the hydropower projects and moving forward with the traditional water harvesting systems, because the implications of these big hydropower projects we have already witnessed in the flash floods which we have recently seen in Himalayas on the Dholi-Ganga river. And therefore, definitely if we are able to bring in certain laws, it could be good for the conservation of the environment as well. Coming on to another important aspect is the cooking material. Now, cooking can be done in various types of utensils. The common utensils are aluminum. However, aluminum actually heats up very quickly. It does not retain heat for long, but has been associated with Alzheimer's. The next is iron. It heats very well, but the issue is with rusting. So rather than iron, we are now having cast iron, which is a alloy of iron plus 2 to 4% of carbon with certain impurities of magnesium and sulfur that are present. The next is stainless steel. Stainless steel retains heat for a longer period. It's one of the most durable ones. It does not react with any kind of acids and is again one of the affordable products that is seen. Non-stick material had been highly in market, but has been related to creating fumes which could be even cancerous in certain cases, and it is also having a shorter lifespan. The next material that could be used is anodized aluminium. It does not react with acid very quickly, but once the anodized layer is gone, which is through the electroplating, it would definitely it would have the same properties as aluminum, because inside the anodization it's the aluminium itself. And usually the anodized aluminium is considered to have layers of both iron as well as aluminum that is there. So those are some of the materials that could be used for cooking purposes. The next is another interesting concept, and this was the cleaning project that was initiated in Andaman. This project was by none other but few of the tourists who actually witnessed or who moved to Andaman for a tourism purpose, and they realized at the Neil Island and the Havelock Island there have been a lot of litter and garbage around. So they brought about a awareness program where most of the waste could actually be recycled. They created various programs in the hotels, resorts, the local people, the countryside area, and door-to-door waste collection ideas, and they were able to gain a strong momentum. Finally, there was a separation of waste or segregation of waste into 6 different categories that started, and later on there was a ban that was imposed on PET bottles, which is under 2 liters, single-use plastic, sachets under 15 ml, the small sachets, the earbuds, the plastic containers, the plastic cigarette lighters, and so on. And this drive was mainly to clean the beaches of Andaman and to protect the originality or the basic ecosystem of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The next is agriculture. Now, agriculture has been considered as the life of India. We have nearly 120 million households who directly or indirectly depend on agriculture in India. Nearly 54% of the total workforce, be it the young or the mid-aged group, are employed directly or indirectly with agriculture. And also India has higher proportion of farm laborers as compared to farm cultivators. Now, there has been a definition that has been given by MS Swaminathan committee. Now, MS Swaminathan basically drafted the National Commission for Farmers. He headed that portal, and in this National Policy for Farmers, he gave a definition for farmer, and that was a person who is engaged in economic or lively activity which is mainly from the primary agricultural commodity. So it could be related to farming, sericulture, agriculture, and so on and so forth. Now, agricultural census has been very important in India. The findings of the agricultural sector reveal that we have 3 sections under which agriculture can actually be witnessed. The first is the small holdings, the medium holdings, and the large holdings. The small holders contribute to nearly 42% of the land, and they constitute nearly 83% of the holdings, and therefore they cultivate only 42% but have a land holding of 83% that is seen. Now, as we have seen during the lockdown, agriculture was the only activity that sustained or had a positive figures in contrast to all other activities during the pandemic period. As we have said, the number of people, the households which have been dependent have increased significantly. During the independence, it was just 70 million households dependent on on agriculture, the 70 million population, which increased to 120 million population. So, an impressive size of the sector has been important, but when it comes to the GDP contribution from agriculture, it has significantly declined from nearly 51% at the time of 1950s to merely 18% of the GDP. So definitely agriculture sector needs to get a rebound. When we were in 1950s and 60s, we were worried about food sufficiency. India did not have sufficient food for its own population. However, when 1990s came, our idea was to provide food grain distribution through the PDS system and remove any kind of hunger that is prevalent in the country. Now 60% of the land holdings that are there are merely dependent on rainfall. So only rainfall is the means. If we talk about average farmer, each farmer has a debt of more than 74,000 rupees, and that is a debt that each of the farmer holds, and nearly 52% of the farmers have a debt that they have to pay back again. So a significant amount of debt that has been seen in the farming community recently. Only 15% of the agricultural households earn 91% of their total farming income. So only few of the farmers are, we could say, the big farmers, and rest all farmers have a subsistence form of living. If we talk about the production statistics, the production in agricultural sector has significantly jumped 13 times in fishery, excuse me, 8 times in milk, 40 times in eggs, 40 times in tomatoes, 14 times in potatoes, and so on and so forth. So there has been a huge increase. A member of an agricultural household basically earns around 214 rupees a month. However, on all the equipments and the basic requirements, 207 rupees are spent. So what merely is left with the farmer is just 7 rupees a month. And that again fluctuates based on the monsoon, based on the undue instances that have been seen. More than 1,000 incidences of crop losses have been registered recently. The average annual earning for a small farmer is around 80,000. For a large farmer which has a holding of more than 10 hectares is much higher, is around 6 lakhs, and for a medium farmer is around 2 lakhs. So we can see the difference in the proportion of the income that is being generated by a small farmer vis-a-vis a large farmer. And also if the farmers are now moving to the crops which are outside the MSP system, the minimum support price. So two of the major crops which are part of MSP are wheat and paddy. If they move out of those cropping systems, they move towards horticulture. And when it comes to horticulture, we have seen that nearly 34% of the fruits and 44% of the vegetables remain unsold. So that is the loss that the farmer has to bear by himself. Also, poor infrastructure, insufficient cold storage, unavailability of cold storage in many extreme regions are some of the other reasons that have accentuated the issues of agriculture and the problems related to agriculture. Also, one of the studies have recently quoted that most of the income coming from the rural areas is from non-farm sector, not the farm sector. So a lot of income is now being generated by sources other than agriculture, even in rural areas. Now also, tribals who were part of the agriculture have been declining. So the tribal farmers have declined nearly 10%, and they have now become agricultural laborers. The proportion of agricultural laborers has gone up by nearly 9%. So a lot of increase in agricultural laborers. The people who were actually farmers have now become laborers. Similarly, we have seen jobs that have been lost in agriculture. Nearly 9 to 10 million jobs have been lost in rural India in comparison to just 2 million jobs in urban India. That shows a significant proportion that has been wiped off from the rural area. Again, a lot of rural periphery is now being merged into urban area. To define an urban area, we simply say a region with a population of 5,000 with at least 400 persons per square kilometer density that are there, and 75% of the population that is engaged in non-agricultural activity. If these three criteria meet, we say in India that region is considered as an urban area. So as per the census town definition which we have given, the number of census towns have significantly increased from 1,362 to 3,894, which is nearly a threefold jump. A huge number of the rural periphery which was originally originally there has now turned up into an urban sector, reducing the actual land for the for the rural area. Now for agriculture, what we require is innovation. Agroforestry, agroecology, conservation agriculture is important. Also, corporate farming, which has been nowadays being talked about, is not much promoted, because on one end we say corporate farming and direct purchase is good, but corporate farming, if you look globally, has not worked well, except for the cases in Africa, the cases of cocoa plantation that is there, where most of the cocoa goes for chocolate industry. We have seen extreme forms of corporate farming that have been prevalent there. So bringing in satellites, bringing in drone, bringing in IoT, automation are some of the ways through which agriculture could be renovated, or agriculture could be redesigned. Retailing in agriculture should be digitized. Nearly 90% of the kiranas across India would be digitized by 2025. So there is a huge change that we have witnessed in the agricultural sector. Also, the research has shown that the growth in the agricultural sector has deaccelerated by 1.7%. Also, the growth in the non-farm or non-agricultural sector has increased by 7.93%. So there has been a decrease in agriculture and an increase in non-farm activity. So even in the rural areas, people are now moving towards non-farm activity. The farmer share again in the retail pricing is quite low. It's only 28%, and the income from the farm and the non-farm sources is 60-40. So people slowly and gradually changing their track from farm to non-farm is one of the common findings that we have seen. Coming on to MS Swaminathan criteria, which has been given, which talks about A2 plus FL. FL is the fixed, the family labor that is there, and A2 includes all kind of cost. This includes the cost of seed, the cost of labor, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of manure, insecticide, and any other miscellaneous cost that has to be bought by the farmer. So this was the criteria. So this cost should be taken into account while giving MSPs. However, there has been a controversy around it, where people are now talking about C2. Now, C2 should be the basis for the cost that has to be given, and this is not just the cost of A2 plus the family labor that is there, but it would also include the cost of the rent, the interest on the owned land that is there, and this should be the total cost that should be taken into account for granting MSP. Now the difference of the two formula basically reveals the costing has a significant difference and has resulted in MSPs which are 50% having more margin. So for example, if the government has fixed the formula for A2 and FL, the costing would be around 1686 per quintal. However, if we take into account the C2 formula, the costing or the MSP should be around 2501 per quintal. So that is the difference in the MSP support price that has been given, and this is one of the major issues of argument. So I repeat again, under the Swaminathan committee we have A2 plus FL as the criteria for MSP. A2 includes the cost on seed, labor, fertilizer, manure, insecticide, and all other miscellaneous costs plus the family labor. And MSP includes what? MSP includes the recommendations that is being asked by, includes the C2 cost. C2 cost is the A2 and the FL cost, along with the rent and the interest owned by the land. Okay, so that needs to be taken into account, and if that is taken into account, the MSP would significantly increase by nearly 50% margin, and therefore the whole debate comes into picture again. So bringing in reserve price and taking into account the H factor, which is the hardship component, into account for agriculture is again very, very important. So this was about the developments that we have seen in Down to Earth this time. We would be covering many further lectures on Down to Earth. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day ahead.